Good evening, everybody, and thank you for coming out tonight. I can't tell you how grateful I am that you've taken this opportunity to come out and listen for a moment to some information that I think is exciting and that I think is a new beginning for the Ysleta Independent School District. Before we get started, what I'd like to do is take a moment and recognize that we have Councilwoman Miss Lily Limon with us this evening. Let's give her a round of applause. Very supportive of our schools and at one time a member of the Ysleta Independent School District. In addition to that, I'd like to introduce Board President Patricia McLean, a proud graduate of Bel Air High School, 1980. Also with us, the current trustee for the Bel Air Learning Community, Miss Connie Woodruff. And from the Riverside High School Learning Community, Miss Ana Dueñas is with us this evening. And I'd like to finally thank all of the school instructional leaders, principals, assistant principals, and members of the superintendent's senior administrative staff for their continued support. Thank you all. It's good to be among clan. This year, the Ysleta Independent School District celebrates 100 years, a centennial. And for those 100 years, this district, in my opinion, has been a very, very attractive option for parents in the Ysleta Independent School District, as well as parents and families who live in neighboring school districts. The information we're going to talk about tonight stems from two reports that the board commissioned early last winter. And the two reports dealt with the enrollment and the future enrollment of students in the Ysleta Independent School District. And then the second report, referred to as the Jacobs Report, was a comprehensive analysis, appraisal of the current state of our facilities in this school district. What we're going to talk about tonight is the combination of both of those reports and why they are relevant to one another. I'm going to share some information from the Jacobs Report relative to some of the recommendations, conclusions, and findings that they shared with the Board of Trustees last week on Wednesday. And then I'd like a moment to share some ideas that we have that we think will reshape, reinvent, in some cases resurrect the Ysleta Independent School District. Because after 100 years of service, the district needs an investment. It's time to get ready to serve and support students for the next 100 years. So let's first talk about enrollment. Prior to even becoming the superintendent of the Ysleta Independent School District, when I was in a neighboring school district, I knew that the Ysleta Independent School District was experiencing a pattern of declining enrollment, and that pattern of declining enrollment had existed for almost 25 years. The truth is that in 1988, this school district had 50,500 students. And at that time, it could accommodate almost 59,000 students. And that isn't a bad ratio. That's not a bad ratio. That's about an 80% ratio. That's what we seek for all of our schools. That's an industry standard. Since 1988, this district has repeatedly lost students every year for 25 years. The exception is 2 years there in the middle in 2003 and 2004. So today the school district has 42,500 students, but it still has 59,000 empty seats. Another way of looking at that is there are 17,000 empty seats in this district, what the Jacobs Report said, and what is true. They said you've got 14 more schools than you need. They further explained that tomorrow we could close 9 elementary schools, 4 middle schools, and 1 high school, and still be able to accommodate 42,500 students, not at 100%, but at 80%. So the schools wouldn't be impacted. They'd be at 80% with 14 less schools. If we wanted our schools at 100%, we could close 24 schools. and we could still accommodate the current student population. And we said that's great, but anyone who's familiar with the Ysleta Independent School District has known that for some time. Most of you have known that the Ysleta Independent School District is geographically landlocked, that it cannot expect any future development, and that it cannot accommodate any significant housing inventory. And that's the reason that families, especially families with small children, are moving to Socorro and to Canutillo and to other parts of the city for affordable housing, health care, and good schools. But the best schools are still in the Ysleta Independent School District. And a testament to that is that there are 6,000 students who don't live in our school district who come to school in this district every day. 4,000 of them live in the Socorro Independent School District, 2,000 live in the YISD, and there's a handful of others that live in other school districts. So what's kept us relevant as a school district in El Paso is that for 100 years, we've been the best option for parents. We've made a significant impact. We've influenced the economy, not just in El Paso or the state, but nationally. We've got thousands of success stories of students who came from almost nothing who have become every bit what they've wanted to become since they were children. Whether it's an astronaut, a physician, an attorney, a scientist, we've got thousands of success stories. And those stories continue to happen every day, even today, in facilities that are far, far from perfect. And we'll talk about the facilities in a minute. But I think we have to accept that at present, if it's true that we could close 14 schools tomorrow and still accommodate all of our students at 80%, and if it's true that each school costs us approximately $1 million a year to operate, or that we spend $15 million every year to operate schools that aren't needed, then it's only right that we have a conversation as to whether or not you, the taxpayer, wants to invest $15 million a year to keep schools open that aren't necessary. So we appreciated the information from the Jacobs report. We appreciated the methodology that they used, and it's hard to refute. But then we asked Jacobs, we said, okay, well, let me tell you a little bit about the Ysleta Independent School District, because it's one thing to process a math problem, because that's what I'm talking about. It's simply a math problem. But if you were the Ysleta Independent School District, what would you do? In other words, which schools would you close? Right? You said 9, 10 elementary schools, you said 3, 4 middle schools, and you suggested that we could even close a high school. And they said, that's right. I said, we'd like you to go back and we'd like you to look at it through this lens. One of the unique things about the Ysleta Independent School District is that it promotes a learning community model. That means there are 7 high schools, 7 feeder patterns. Each of those feeder patterns have a group of elementary schools, either 1 or 2 middle schools, and 1 high school. My trustees, your trustees, identify with each and every one of those high schools. Don't get me wrong. They genuinely care about the whole district. But they have a special affinity, in some cases a special interest in their learning community. Ms. Woodruff is very interested in what happens in the Bel Air learning community. Ms. Duenas is very interested in what happens in the Riverside learning community. It's not uncommon for a trustee to refer to our schools as their high school, their middle school or middle schools. They'll say my elementary schools. Heck, they'll tell me that their principal or their teachers, because that is woven into the tapestry that is this school district. That's just the reality. So when the Jacobs report suggested that you could operate this school district with 6 feeder patterns, that you could eliminate an entire feeder pattern of schools, a group of elementary schools, middle schools, and 1 high school. You could consolidate, and in the lower valley, you could accommodate every child with just 3 high schools. At present, we have Del Valle, Ysleta, Riverside, and Bel Air. The Jacobs group said, you don't need 4, you need 3. We said, that just can't happen in the Ysleta Independent School District. That's who we are. So what you have to make a distinction, when you have to make the distinction, is that there are going to be recommendations that you've already heard, that have been in the media, that are sound recommendations, but they're recommendations from a neutral third party who was hired to give a very objective, unvarnished, unabridged opinion. They didn't have to take into consideration the history, the culture, the politics. They simply applied a template and they arrived at all of this information. We asked them to take it a step further, and we asked them to look at it by feeder pattern. And we asked them to look at it from the following elements. We want you to look at the capacity of the school. How many children, how many students can the school accommodate? And then we want you to look at it based on the utilization. How many children are in the school? Then we'd like you to tell us the condition of that school, and more importantly, what will it cost to address the needs of that school? And they came up with a facility condition index, a number that indicates the condition of each of these schools. 60 schools. Millions and millions of dollars. In fact, across the district, it's $303 million. That's what it would take. But I want to be clear about this. It would take $303 million to address the immediate needs. That's to repair or replace what we know is broken today, this year, and for 4 more years. The $303 million do not enhance the learning environment. They don't include any additional amenities. They don't include any additional technology. They don't include any additional facilities. It's to simply repair what we know we need to repair or replace today and for the next 4 years. So another way of looking at it is that we could theoretically spend $303 million, and I could theoretically be in front of you 6 years from now telling you that we need another $303 million for the next 5 years. Because buildings continue to decay, electrical systems continue to decay, mechanical systems will continue to decay. But it's a start, $303 million. Well, we could accept that, but what we decided to do, or I should say more accurately, what the board decided to do was they convened their own facility assessment committee made up of your peers, of 7 representatives from each of the 7 feeder pattern. There were 49 of them. They spent 8 weeks on a bus going out and looking at the schools to see whether or not what the Jacobs report said was true. And then they reported to the board on that same Wednesday last week. And they had a lot of information, but here's the bottom line that I think really moved me. They said that they could validate the Jacobs report, that everything in the Jacobs report was accurate, except for one thing. They thought that the Jacobs report understated. Understated. In other words, they didn't go far enough to describe how bad some of our schools were. That they found them to be in worse shape than the experts from Dallas-Fort Worth. That they couldn't believe that we've accomplished what we've accomplished as a district, that our teachers, administrators, support staff, custodians, cafeteria workers have worked in these conditions, and that we've been able to still do so much with so little. And that in their opinion, we're still the best option for kids and families in this area under the current circumstances. And so the question came up, can you imagine what we could do for students if we provided the adults in our system with the resources and the facilities they need? Because if they can do what they're doing with what you're providing them, they're miracle workers. So we appreciated the endorsement by the Facility Assessment Committee. We also convened 3 subcommittees. and they were called the Equity and Enhancement Subcommittees. And they didn't look at simply what the Jacobs Group looked at or what the Facilities Assessment Committee looked at. They looked at things that other districts in other cities and in El Paso enjoyed, that they took for granted. They looked at the fact, for example, that we remain the last school district in the city of El Paso who hasn't introduced artificial surface as a playing surface at any of our 7 stadiums, and yet El Paso, Canutillo, Clint, Horizon have all found a way to make that investment. They pointed out that we're the only district in the city that doesn't have a UIL-rated stage or auditorium for our drama, band, music, and orchestra programs to practice. And they listed a number of other, I'll call them amenities, that they think would elevate this district and secure its place as the most attractive option for families and students. A 21st century world-class public school system. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. So let me show you what they came up with for the Bel Air feeder pattern. And by the way, they did this for every one of the 7 feeder patterns. This is just something I shared with you. That's the enrollment, that's the trend that this district has experienced since 1988 when you were at 50,628 students, I think. These are the 2 years where there was an anomaly and we saw a slight increase from the previous year, but since that time it's 370. We've lost 864 in 2012, 511, 557, and we anticipate, I guess the latest figure is another 500 students next year. Illustratively, this is the district. You can't see here, or maybe you can. Can you barely see those schools? That represents the 14 schools with 15,077 empty seats. If you look at it just from a high school perspective, you have 3,971 empty seats. If the industry standard is 2,000 students per high school, what this indicates is that we have 2 empty high schools if we put all of the students in the remaining 5 high schools. Middle school utilization, 61% with 4,478 empty seats. Elementary school, 71% utilization, 8,960 seats. In the aggregate, 1 in every 3 classrooms are empty. The lights are on. The air conditioning or heat is running. That room is insured, and literally no one is home. That's where the $15 million a year savings come from. Bel Air Learning Community. We'll start with Del Norte. The top bar shows utilization or current enrollment and then capacity. So to read this diagram, you'd read that the school is half empty, has 387 empty seats, and would require $4.9 million to repair, again, those needs of today and for 4 more years. Hacienda Heights Elementary School, 249 empty seats. That means 1 in 3 classrooms are empty, and the facility needs $7.7 million invested. Loma Terrace, 297 empty seats, 33% empty. Again, 1 in 3, an investment of $5.5 million. Mesa Vista Elementary School, only 161 empty seats, not bad, and a $2.9 million investment required. North Loop is a relatively new school, no investment required, and it has some capacity. And finally, Sageland Elementary School, home of the Micro Society program, has a super attendance or enrollment rate with only 41 empty seats, but does need about $5 million of investment. Now, here's all the Jacobs Group said. Because again, they don't know your community. They don't know our district. What they simply said was, looking at it from an outsider, I would recommend that you have 4 schools, but at minimum 5 elementary schools instead of 6. That would be a step in the right direction. That you close at least 1 school, and if afforded the opportunity, you could theoretically close 2 elementary schools. That's the Jacobs report. What I and the staff are considering, and what we may recommend to the board after we continue and study this, and what we'd like your feedback on is this: that we would consolidate both of these schools. But rather than take all of these students and redirect them to Hacienda Heights Elementary School and close Del Norte Elementary School, that we would build a new elementary school for these students. And let me tell you why that makes sense. An elementary school costs $18 million. You've already got $5 million here, and you've almost got $8 million here. That's $13 million. We can invest $13 million in either school or in one school and accept that $13 million investment will only carry us for 5 years. That is a huge investment for 5 years worth of relief. Or we can add an additional $5 million or $6 million, and we can build them a brand new, state-of-the-art elementary school with all of the features that make a 21st century classroom. And by that I mean current technologies, emerging technologies, learning environments that promote cooperative learning, collaboration, learning environments that promote project-based learning and problem-based learning. We could reinvent the learning environment for a group of children that are going to go out into a world that's very different than the world that welcomed most of us. Or we could do what happens with automobiles sometimes. There are a lot of people out there that like taking old automobiles from salvage yards or from garages where the automobile has been left, and they've invested resources. They've put a lot of money into that automobile, that 1953 Corvette. And at the end of that process, that 1953 Corvette looks exactly the way it looked in the Chevrolet showroom in 1953. But you know what? You still got to roll the windows up like this. I suspect there are people in this room that have never rolled up a window like this. You thought that the button was always there. You still don't have power steering. Your seats still don't get warm when you click a button or cool when you click a button. And when you get lost, that beautiful, immaculate 1954 Corvette will not have a GPS for you. So you can invest the money in Del Norte Elementary School or the money in Hacienda Heights, or you can combine the money and invest it at Hacienda Heights, because Hacienda Heights is the only school that can accommodate both student populations, and you will still have a 1951 elementary school for children who are going into a 2020 world. That's what drives me. That's what this is about. As I've said to the media, as I've said to everybody else, none of this is about saving money. It's about providing students, your children, my children, I have 4 of them in this school district, with a learning environment that's going to prepare them to be successful and thrive in the 21st century. We've got phenomenal teachers that can overcome this, that's true. But if we allow our buildings to continue to decay, will we be able to continue and attract the best and brightest teachers when they can go to either of the neighboring school districts, who, by the way, are growing at an accelerated rate and need new teachers every year because they'd prefer to work in an environment that's conducive to their teaching style? Because most of the teachers coming out of colleges and universities today are digital natives. They're more comfortable with technology than any of us will ever be. The idea of teaching at an Eastlake High School or one of the brand new elementary schools with all of the technology available in the classroom, with interactive whiteboards, devices, bring your own device policies, may become too attractive to expect them to come back and work in the Ysleta Independent School District. We currently benefit from having tremendous teachers in spite of the facilities. Okay, let's keep going. Oops. Loma Terrace needs the $5.5 million investment. We'll likely recommend that investment. Same with Mesa Vista, same with Sageland. Let's take a look at another scenario that the Jacobs Group looked at. Hillcrest, half empty, requires $6.2 million. Ranchland Middle School, 442 empty seats, $4.5 million. Let me tell you what's most important. Hillcrest has right at, I believe, 550 students. 470? 470 students. It went down since yesterday. No, that's not true. 470 students. Ranchland Hills has less than 400 students. The two schools combined can accommodate almost 2,000 students. Again, what's before us, what's before the board is, do you invest $11 million on two facilities where either one of those facilities may be able to accommodate the students? That's the Jacobs report. And the Jacobs report would say absolutely not. They'd say, take the $11 million, make an investment at Hillcrest Middle School, and consolidate the student body. And it's logical. It's sound from an economic standpoint. What we would suggest, and take a moment to listen to this, what we might suggest is that we do consolidate both of these schools, but that we build them a new Bel Air Middle School. And we build it at the corner of Ranchland Hills Drive and Venado. And that it become Bel Air Middle School. And that it look a lot like that school called Eastwood Middle School. And that by having these 900 students together at one middle school, you improve their athletic program, you improve their visual and performing art programs, you improve the participation in their extracurricular activities, their clubs, and their organizations, and they become Highlanders, and there's absolutely no doubt about where they're going to school next. And they do all that in a brand new middle school. And then what I'd like to do is I'd like to take Hillcrest, and I'd like to open the area's first single-gender academy for young ladies, the Young Ladies Leadership Academy, for young women grades 6 through 12 interested in STEM. We'd have 100 to 120 young ladies in each grade level promoting STEM, promoting science, technology, engineering, and mathematics with a focus on a 90+ admittance or acceptance rate to colleges and universities. We would repurpose Hillcrest for that reason. Ranchland. Let's go back. I said I'd like to build them a new elementary school for $18 million. I'd recommend we tear down Ranchland Hills Middle School, and that's where we'd build the new elementary school for both Del Norte and Hacienda Heights. A brand new state-of-the-art middle school there, whether it's Bel Air Middle School or we come up with another name, that's an idea for you to consider. So in all of this, instead of taking that deficit approach where, the study says we've got too many elementary schools and we've got too many middle schools, let's flip that. Let's say we certainly do. But let's not move a group of students from one weary, tired old school to another weary, old, tired school for the sake of saving money. Let's instead use the opportunity to consolidate, but to consolidate with an interest in creating a better learning environment in a brand new facility for those students. Because the money we need for investment, just to repair them, is more than half of what you need to build them a brand new school. I'm one of those sort of financial or fiscal conservatives. I will drive a car to the ground. But sooner or later, I realized that my car has spent more time in the shop, and I've probably paid more in repairs over the course of a year than it would have cost me to buy a new car. That's what we're looking at here. Bel Air High School needs about $20 million, a $20 million investment. We'd recommend that Bel Air High School get a $20 million investment. But that's really the story for the Bel Air community. Securing your support, securing the support of people like you to allow us to consolidate Del Norte and Hacienda and build a new elementary school, invest in all the other elementary schools, allow us to resurrect Bel Air Middle School on that property I just shared with you, and let us invest in Bel Air High School. Now, there's interest by the subcommittees and by staff and by others that fall outside of this conversation. And they deal with this. They deal with equity and enhancement, and some of the things that I touched on, but I want to go into a little bit deeper. Our athletics subcommittee went out and they visited all of these facilities. Eastwood Middle School, High School, Del Valle Elementary School. You can see. They went out to visit all of these facilities, and then they went out and visited facilities that are outside the district. I want you to look at this. Southwest University Park. Nice visit, and I suspect it's probably a little unrealistic to expect to have something like that in a school district, but it does set the gold standard, and it allows us to be able to visualize what we can maybe achieve, although we're certain that it won't be anything like Southwest University Park. But what really moves me, what really affects me is that Clint has found a way to put artificial surface on every one of their stadiums. Clint has found a way to have a brand new scoreboards and goalposts. Eastlake, what a beautiful gymnasium. Why can't the Ysleta Independent School District have an aquatic center or a natatorium in a central location that would be available to our students? Why is it that the quality of life that we hear so much about in the newspaper is really the quality of life on the west side? Why can't it be the quality of life here? The El Paso Independent School District has their tennis center. Why couldn't we have conversations around having our own lighted 12-court tennis center? We have very, very strong and competitive wrestling programs, and we have catastrophic facilities for those wrestlers. And we've actually had programs that have gone to state and have medaled at state, and we've got them working out underneath bleachers somewhere with leaking water. These were their recommendations. They said, when you're having these conversations with your stakeholders, let them know that these are some of the interests that we have. Artificial turf, remodeling, rebuilding gymnasiums, especially auxiliary gyms, upgrading lighting, scoreboards, sound systems. How about a centralized gymnastics wrestling facility? Or should we be content with having our gymnastic facility located adjacent to our basketball court? And asking the young ladies and the young men to remove their equipment anytime that we have a basketball game. especially given their performance and how they compete. This one I really like. I enjoyed playing football and baseball in high school and in college. And I can tell you that what's true here was true in my own upbringing. And that is that we'd be released from class at about 11:30 to start a baseball game at 2 o'clock, which meant that I was happy because I got to miss half of my classes, right? And so we take kids and we remove them from an instructional environment so that they can get to a baseball game, or we take our young ladies from the instructional environment so they can get to a softball game at 2 o'clock, because if they don't start at 2 o'clock, the sun will go down before they can finish the game. The games are probably well attended, but could certainly be better attended here. I can count on one hand the number of times that my mom and dad watched me play baseball at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. They were really insensitive and indelicate. They were at work. So if we could put lights on our baseball fields and on our softball fields, wouldn't it be great to keep the kids in class? But wouldn't it be just as great to play the games at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the evening so that our student athletes' parents could come out and participate in their son and daughter's activity? Wouldn't it be nice that our baseball stadium and the seating would look a lot like our football stadium? We'd like to put lights on all baseball, softball fields, and tennis facilities district-wide. That's something we're really thinking about. Remodel tracks at middle schools, weight rooms to be expanded and equipped. We're talking about a centralized facility, the Ysleta Activities and Aquatic Complex. Same location of the natatorium. But it could include wrestling facilities, gymnastics facilities. We could talk about indoor golf practice facility. All of that is just a conversation at this moment. It's mayonnaise on a hot summer sidewalk. You all know what happens when you spill a little mayonnaise on a summer sidewalk. It disappears. All right. Fine arts. They've recommended that we look at a state-of-the-art performing and visual arts complex, just like the photograph you see, for the entire district. What is true is that in the Ysleta Independent School District, there isn't one school or facility that currently has a UIL-rated stage. That when we go compete at a regional level, there are adverse consequences because our thespians, our performers, are accustomed to working with a very small space. All of a sudden, they put up all of their props and their backdrop, and it's dwarfed by the size of the UIL-rated stage. Having one of these, and we've got the perfect location for it, on Alameda where the fine arts facilities are currently located. We'd like to talk about building a performing arts center that could accommodate an audience of anywhere from 1,500 to 2,500 for these large-scale events that would be available to all the schools in the district. And that would be really a shining star for this school district. Visual facility, I probably missed some. Equity in all middle schools, fine art facilities to match those at Eastwood Middle School. Some priority should be given to Eastwood Knolls, Ranchland Hills, Rio Bravo, and Ysleta. Needless to say, they're valid. They're valid interests by folks in the Visual and Performing Arts Department who want to make sure that students in this district have access to these facilities because other students have access to these facilities. Technology, we really need to make an investment in technology. What comes with having very, very old schools is that many of our schools cannot accommodate the hardware, routers, switches, connectors needed to guarantee internet access, video streaming, and all of the other enhancements that come with a school that has a sound technology foundation. This would be an investment we would make district-wide at all schools, including increased access to emerging devices for students. That means tablets, laptops, desktops. It means that we'd promote a centralized funding formula for technology to make sure that there's equity from one school to another, a 4-year replacement cycle for both teacher computers as well as student computers, funding for professional development. We currently invest in a campus technologist at every school, and this is big. Given all of the tragedies that have happened recently, we'd like to introduce a safety security kiosk, and that is a single point of entry in each and every one of our elementary schools that require surveillance identification and a swipe card to be able to even access the front office. That no one gets in the school who hasn't registered for their visitor pass or their swipe card, and that everyone is vetted using surveillance cameras before they're allowed in the building. And we can go as far as having magnetic strips that would guarantee that every perimeter door on our elementary school campuses locks automatically at a particular time of the day. Because middle schools and high schools have too many points of entry, we'd invest in surveillance cameras, but we'd also invest in attractive perimeter fencing that would control access to our facilities to the extent possible. Those of you that work at high schools and middle schools know that there are just too many points of entry to rely on doors being kept locked and not being left open. We have to find ways to at least monitor areas using surveillance cameras. That's all part of the technology conversation. Again, this is all about just having a conversation. We've got a lot of work ahead of us. These 7 community forum meetings where I get to share a vision is an opportunity to get feedback from you and to answer any and all of your questions. People always say, hey, you talk a lot about 21st century classrooms and 21st century learning spaces. What are you talking about? Well, what I'm talking about is, depending on the decade, the typical classroom went through stages. Before class size reduction, we had a nice rectangular classroom that was intended to accommodate 30, 32 seats in nice, neat, even rows and a teacher's desk in the front. And then we introduced class size reduction, and all of a sudden the architects were building schools with very small classrooms that should only have to accommodate 20, 22 students, because the law prohibits there being any more than 22 students. So they're very restrictive when it comes to doing things like differentiating instruction and cooperative learning and project-based learning and promoting the things that our children will need in the 21st century, like resolve, resilience, communication. And by the way, this district is ahead of other districts in one area that I think is certainly a 21st century learning skill. And that is that this district has always appreciated and embraced being bicultural, biliterate, and bilingual. We have one of the most effective and incredible international schools, not just in El Paso, but in the state and nationally. And we plan to scale that and add 2 additional international schools in the near future. We've got great ideas for this school district. That's the Performing Arts Center. That's not actually ours yet. That's just a picture of what ours could look like. But that's actually what I'm talking about. All right. At this time, I'd be happy to entertain any questions that you may have, but that's what makes me get up excited every morning. It's what keeps me up at night. It's why I love what I do. It's what drew me to this job, because we have such a great opportunity to really, really change the trajectory of this school district and of the experience that children in this school district have for years to come. And I don't mean 4 or 5 years to come. I want to change the trajectory for the next 25, 30 years. I want to reinvent, resurrect, lead in a renaissance of this school district. That's what I'm all about.
Commissioner Vincent Perez here. You might want to
Oh,
proceed.
Where? He's a Bel Air graduate. Mr. Vincent Perez, let's give him a hand. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. All right, we've got microphones. We'll come out to you, and we've got a hand up right here.
Graduated from Bel Air as well. When is the time frame for all this to happen?
Well, we're going to work with our communities for about the next 6 weeks. And then if we feel comfortable with a proposal, we may bring a proposal to the board either on February 18th, but no later than March 4th for their consideration. Now, here's something that's important to understand. Neither I or the Board of Trustees can make this happen. It isn't a situation where we have $303 million in the bank and we just want your blessing. We don't have $303 million. This initiative, this vision would require that voters go out and assume a greater burden, a property tax burden, to make it happen. So people can't or shouldn't get upset with the superintendent or the board or anyone, because ultimately the only way it can happen is if the voting constituency goes out and says yes. And so if there's anything up here that gives you heartburn or that you can't support, it's just a matter of going out and saying no, because without these resources, this can't happen. This can't happen. Without resources, we go back to looking like ISD, where we in fact don't introduce new buildings, we don't introduce new schools, we simply close and consolidate schools to save money, and children move from one old school to another old school because it makes economic sense. That's not what this is about. This is about reinventing the district. We have very little interest in doing that. Questions? Up there and then down here.
I had a question about what's going to happen to the special education programs at the schools that have them right now.
So for example, the TLCC program that's being housed where we plan to build Bel Air Middle School, we have some ideas in terms of where we could relocate them in one of our existing buildings, but we'll continue. As a matter of fact, a lot of what you saw up there in terms of the investment is intended to improve our special ed facilities at Bel Air High School and all of the other schools, adding sensory rooms, updated changing rooms, and other facility needs that they have, that students with special needs have.
Okay, my name is Marta. Everything looks good, but what is going to happen with the teacher real jobs?
Great question. There's a misconception that when you consolidate or close schools that teachers lose jobs. Teachers, and the way we currently staff and employ teachers, are driven by enrollment numbers. So if you take 300 children, we'll just use Ranchland Hills Middle School, and you move them to another school, the teachers have to come with them because there aren't enough teachers at the new school to educate the children. So teachers go with the students, support staff goes with the students, the ladies in the cafeteria and the men in the cafeteria go with the students, the custodians go with the students. Now, there are some positions where you don't need two. You don't need two principals. You may not need two nurses. You don't need two librarians. Every year in this district, over 200 people leave. It's called positive attrition. They retire, resign, relocate, get a promotion. We know this information almost a year in advance. Now let's stop and think. If in fact we secured the resources to consolidate Hillcrest and Ranchland Hills in May, that wouldn't likely happen until the fall of 2017. Why? Because it takes 18 months to build a middle school. In that 18-month period, you're going to have plenty of retirements and resignations and relocations and promotions. With thoughtful and deliberate planning, no one loses their job. In fact, what the board has said to me is there can be no adverse impact on people to do what you want to do. everyone must remain gainfully employed unless it has to do with their performance or something at the state level that was unanticipated.
Sir, this young lady wants to ask if it does go for a bond, the trustees do accept it, when will the bond actually go to, for voters to vote for it? What date?
The trustees would have to decide that as well. So the optimal option would be May 9th of 2015. The next opportunity would be November of 2015. Now, having been part of 3 bond elections, the election is either won or lost in early voting. So it really isn't May 9th. It's that 10-day, 12-day window of early voting that ultimately decides whether there's support or a lack of support for a facilities bond.
I'm all for the Bel Air Middle School as long as it's equitable with the Eastwood Middle School. But I think Bel Air needs a gymnasium here, to be honest with you. Because if you look at the street out here, the parking, if we could get a Bel Air gym, there's ideas of putting one here. You could have a huge parking lot that would get these cars off the street, and the safety is a real big problem here. So for 2 reasons. If you look at our little gym over here, it's not much to it, and it's not really safe for games and stuff. But we use this facility quite a bit, and other places use it too. But we really need a Bel Air gym right here.
Like a new main gym or auxiliary gym?
A new gym or auxiliary. Well, we need something that can have a parking lot to get people off the street here. Even the football game can use it during football time, and the students can use it to park at. But this street's horrible to park on, and it's very dangerous.
Agreed.
And if you had a gym with a good-sized parking lot, it would serve 2 purposes.
I appreciate
So we
that.
really need a Bel Air gym.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I was going to ask you on your consolidation, or putting all those 2 schools together, on your little graph you show you're going to have more students than the graph shows there. Is that not going to create more classes more filled up with?
Well, if we consolidate, let's take, for example, the elementary schools. The new elementary school, in order to accommodate Hacienda Heights and Del Norte, would have to be an elementary school that can accommodate 1,000 students. Yes. Right, but the students wouldn't be going to either one of those 2 schools. They'd be going to a brand new Bel Air Middle School at a 3rd location. And that Bel Air Middle School would accommodate 1,200 students. What we have in aggregate, or together with both of those middle schools, is about 900 students. So we'd build a middle school for about 1,200 students. Now, people always ask, well, what happens if they grow beyond the 1,200 students? You'll look like it was poor planning. Well, when I build schools, or when I've built schools in the past, we always have a contingency wing where everything underground is already put in place. The plumbing, the electrical, all of that is underground. There just isn't the wing above it. So should the students arrive at some point, we wouldn't have to go back and trench. We'd know that there's already a pad underneath the ground where we could put an additional 8-pack or 10-pack, they call them, of classrooms.
Sir?
Yes, ma'am.
My question is, with these facilities you're going to close, do you have future plans for them? For example, Hacienda, are you going to put some type of new building there, or you're just going to demolish it completely? What's going to happen with those buildings?
Right. Now, nothing's been decided, but here are some things that we need to consider. Some of the facilities that we've identified for closure may be very attractive commercial properties. And if we believe that that commercial property could generate some significant revenue, we'd sell the property and then use that revenue to offset the debt or the bond. There are other facilities that we think may be attractive to repurpose or work something out with the city or Pride Industries or El Paso Workforce to provide them with offices or facilities to continue to use the facility. What we don't want to do is leave a vacant facility in anybody's neighborhood and then fail to maintain it, because what ends up happening is vandalism, graffiti, they break in, all kinds of nefarious behavior takes place in the building. And so in those cases, it makes sense to knock the building down and then just maintain the lot. The other thing that we need to be aware of is that any school that you leave vacant becomes very attractive to charter schools. And charter schools, they're not all bad, but most of them are. But most of them are.
Sir? Sir, we have a question over here.
You were speaking of closing down Hacienda and Del Norte and putting them in a new facility at Ranchland. But have you thought about the safety issues for all the children that are going to have to cross the busy streets, which is Hunter, with all the college students trying to get to the college and everybody else?
Yes, I've thought of that. As a matter of fact,
How would that work?
the state law will not allow those students to cross Hunter. We'd have to provide transportation.
Okay. Dr. De La Torre?
Yes.
My son attends Del Norte and he's a special needs child who has, Mrs. Benegas has provided one-on-one attention for him during certain hours of the day.
Yes,
How
ma'am.
is that going to continue with the consolidation into the new school, providing them that still one-on-one attention that they do need?
So the programs at the current schools would simply move to the brand-new facility, and they may actually have better facilities at the new school. And as I mentioned before, your son's teacher would accompany him to the new school, as would the program, as required, I believe, under the ARD or the IEP. Nothing would change. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, ok. Mi pregunta es, lo felicito por sus proyectos, ¿verdad? Lo que yo no entiendo es por qué tienen tan olvidado el programa de educación especial. Para nuestros niños de educación especial falta mucha tecnología, mucho apoyo para sacarlos adelante. Muchas veces los tienen nomás ahí como betabel, como vegetal.
Sí.
Entonces, sí, yo sí le pido de favor, gracias a Dios mi hija ya va a colegio, pero toda esa trayectoria como usted nos presentó en las escuelas también falta para los niños de educación especial.
Yeah. Did everybody understand that?
Mucho.
And what she said is absolutely true, and that is, how did we ever get to a place where our facilities for our students with special need are so catastrophic? I mean, they are. Not only is it challenging to be a student with special need, but then we put them in dark, cold, out-of-the-way facilities that were never intended to support children with special needs. So a big part of the investment we're making in all of our schools is to address the terrible, terrible conditions in some cases that our students with special needs experience. They've got terrific, terrific teachers. But when you look at the facility, where they spend their day, it's Reichert. It's gray, it's cold, it's dark. We've created sensory rooms. We've created changing rooms out of rooms that have no utilities for that kind of thing. That needs to be addressed. A big part of why we're doing this is because of our students with special needs and the number of concerns that I've heard just in 10 months about where we house these children. And again, the staff does an incredible job, but it isn't even fair to the staff. And you can start right at this school right here. You know, so the investment, that $20 million that we want to invest in Bel Air High School, includes improvements to those facilities, or would include.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
I think you believe you said $20 million you were going to invest in Bel Air High School. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, that money, is that going to go towards Bel Air High School, or are you going to just invest in the magnet school?
Just the magnet school.
That's it?
No, Bel Air High School. The $20 million is the the set investment for this high school. The magnet school, are you talking about the Health Professions Academy?
Yeah.
Because it's new, it really requires very little investment. What requires a significant investment are all of the older buildings, as Mr. Woodruff indicated, athletic facilities, and then the older part of the school really needs a lot of attention.
So are you talking about the actual classrooms, all those?
Yes.
That's what you're planning on?
Those
upgrading?
classrooms, and then we're also very concerned about the classrooms that are located behind your stadium back there. They need significant attention. We promise.
I like the idea that you were talking about combining Hillcrest with Ranchland. I currently have a student at Mesa Vista who is in the dual language program. So my concern would be if you combine Hillcrest and Ranchland, whereas Ranchland is the only dual language middle school currently, well, at least within the feeder pattern, would that still remain the same once you combine the two schools?
It has to. What the Board of Trustees have said is that we need to insulate our programs so that there is what we refer to as vertical alignment. I'll give you an example. You don't want a child to take French K-6 and then arrive at a middle school that doesn't have a French program. So if you're going to run a French program at the elementary school, then we have to give parents the assurance that there will be a French program at the middle school and even at the high school. That kind of vertical alignment has to happen, or you're doing a disservice to children who are under the impression that they're going to master proficiency in French, only to find out that in the 6th grade or in the 7th grade it stops. Or worse, they have to go to another middle school and then to another high school. We can't have them hopping across the district. When we make a commitment to a world language or a dual language program, it has to start at K and it has to end at 12.
What happens if the bonds don't go through? Is there a way to get the money other ways? Or it has to all come from bonds, the voting?
Yeah, the district has limited resources, and what we've been doing with those limited resources is, because we really don't have any choices, we've been in a very reactive mode. So the call comes in that a boiler's broken down, we run out and we fix that boiler. Then all of a sudden the electricity isn't working at a school and we run out and we fix the electricity. So what we're doing is we're patching up everything as it surfaces. So we really can't do anything that anyone would refer to as strategic or thoughtful or deliberate. That isn't a plan. What that is that's a reaction to what happens to us instead of taking control and making things happen for us. And so we would continue to have approximately $4 million a year, every year, to address things that surface that were unanticipated, because it's hard to plan with so little resources. A lot of what we've done recently to improve schools, roofs, air conditioning, things like that, were actually proceeds from the 2004 bond. It was the interest that we generated that we had. That money's no longer available. We've gone 10 years without coming out to our constituents to ask for support. And so we don't have the money to do any of this without the support of the community. Again, this is ultimately going to be decided by you. Yes, ma'am.
Mine's not a question. I just wanted to comment. I was part of the facilities assessment committee that we had. And the first 3 schools that we went to go see was Eastwood Middle, Del Valle Elementary, and Pre-K. And let me tell you, it was the most amazing 3 schools that I've ever seen. It just shows what this district could do. And after that, when we went to see the rest of the schools, including Bel Air, Del Norte, Hacienda, Ranchland, it blew our minds what we could do. And I think that's why it's very, very important for all of you to go out and vote for this bond. I know it's kind of scary to say, oh, we're going to consolidate schools and things are going to change. But if you could just see what these 3 schools brought to these students, I mean, you'd be amazed. It's just the most amazing thing that all of us as a committee went through. So, I mean, I just wanted to say how important it was for that.
Yes, I want to add to what Mr. Woodruff said. I agree with him. We need to have more facilities here at Bel Air. And I know that you're consolidating Hacienda and Del Norte because of attendance, but wouldn't it be good to maybe move Sageland? Since Bel Air is landlocked, that would give us room there to build them a brand new gym or something else there and have this area as an auxiliary gym or something for the wrestling or something like that. My thing is, you know, maybe we keep one of the other schools and move Sageland somewhere and give us more room here at Bel Air to grow.
Thank you.
Well, right here, I have a question.
Oh, there he is.
You talk about consolidating the schools, but they're going to be in a different location. This by transportation, all those students are going to be bused.
Yes, sir.
And the one is going close to, so going to be buses for all these students as far as transportation.
Yes.
Oh, okay, that's one of my questions.
Now remember, at one time we had 50,000 students, so we do have a rather large bus fleet, because at one time we had far more students than we have. And given that we've locked in the current $1.89 a gallon for gas for the next 10 years, you can't do that? And it's not going to stay at $1.89, you don't think? We should all go invest in gas now, right? Yeah, we have the transportation, but really what we're talking about right now is really 2 new schools. I think the property that we're considering for a new Bel Air Middle School is located in a nice central location. I know that the Del Norte community and even Hacienda Heights to some extent would have to move, I believe, a little east to get to a brand new elementary school. And Hunter is a problem, and we will certainly provide transportation to those students.
Yes, I have a question. It's nice that you say the middle schools and elementaries are going to be built new and updated, but ultimately the students are going to be coming to the high schools, to an old Bel Air, an old Ysleta, an old Riverside, and I think there's a hidden cost there that maybe you haven't considered now. Just wanting to know if you did consider that.
Well, you know, like I said, we've set aside the $20 million figure as a way to, I think, address most of the current challenges at Bel Air. Aside from that, we'd really have to start thinking about rebuilding the high school, because the high school is, what, 1970? How old is this?
It's 50.
From the 1960s. So it all comes down to money. I mean, maybe down the road we could take a look at our high schools, but right now I think we need to find a way to do as much as we can for every school that we want to continue and operate. And, you know, suggestions like a new gym, suggestions like a new wing, all of those can be taken into consideration, but they do come with a price tag. As it stands now, when you talk about a bond, you're talking about a bond that can be minimum, you know, $350, $60 million to, if you wanted to really introduce a lot of what was shared, to as much as $420, $430 million. And the way that translates is it can be an increase in the property tax of as low as 5 cents per $100 for the average homeowner to as high as 10 cents for every $100 of value for the average homeowner, which means about an $8 to $9 increase in property tax every month for the average homeowner. For those that fall below that, it's less than that. For those that are above that, it's a little bit more than that. But it depends on what we think the market can bear.
Right. Another item just came to mind. I know this might sound a little bit crazy because you already have your plans, but...
No, they're written in mayonnaise.
Okay. Maybe consolidating Sageland with Bel Air High School, since it's right next to each other, and using Hacienda or another one of these schools for Sageland to consolidate with somebody else. And that's just a thought.
So let me make sure I understand this. So there's an interest in a new gymnasium that doesn't necessarily have to be on the Bel Air campus, but that would accommodate both a gym and parking for a gym, even if it meant moving Sageland to Hacienda or to Del Norte. Okay, I just wanted to make sure I understood your vision.
Because I feel Bel Air's starting to be very limited in space.
Okay? It's not bad. Yes?
Superintendent, well, first I want to thank you very much for taking the time to go to every high school and informing the community about this important bond project. I think it's very important to be very transparent, so we appreciate that you take the time to come to every school, so thank you for that. I attended Sageline Elementary, Ranchland Hills Middle, and Bel Air High School, and I remember Ranchland, even when I went there, was in bad shape. We had lots of portables. I still remember the red and blue tiles that we had here at Bel Air. We didn't even have the wood floors, so things have come a long way. When I talk to constituents that I represent, one of the biggest issues that I often hear is taxes. And I think it's important, I guess, to be transparent. You already answered part of this question. When it comes to the bond issue, this will certainly have an impact on property owners and their tax rates. Currently, YISD has the second highest tax rate in El Paso County. So I guess what would be the impact to the maintenance and operation side of the tax rate and also to the tax interest?
The debt.
And I guess secondly, that's my first question. And then second, one of the concerns I have is that, other school districts such as YISD, they have wealthier neighborhoods that have homes that are valued in the area of $400,000. Socorro has the same thing with the Paseo de Este, where you have homes that are valued at $400,000. They also have businesses like Western Refining and things. So we're kind of a district that's landlocked that doesn't have the commercial industry. Right. So a lot of the burden will fall on property owners. Can you just kind of explain about that?
I think I can speak to both of them. Let's start with the first one, because the first one's really important, and I'm glad that you brought that up. Commonly, even when I was next door, I was under the impression that the Ysleta Independent School District had the highest or the second highest tax rate. It's $1.36. I think El Paso is $1.33. I think Socorro may have climbed to $1.23 or $1.28, something like that. So on the surface, it appears that taxpayers in the Ysleta Independent School District pay more taxes for their schools than almost anyone else. Let's stop and look at that again. Let's take 3 hypothetical homeowners that all live in a house valued at $100,000, because it's a nice, easy number. Each house valued at $100,000 will benefit from a statutory homestead exemption of, I believe, $15,000. So on the surface, it would appear that all 3 houses will be taxed at $85,000. But wait, let's take a step back, because something happens in the Ysleta Independent School District before you apply the $15,000 statutory homestead exemption. And what happens is this: in the Ysleta Independent School District, you first get a 20% homestead exemption from the district. That means that before you even start the comparison, the house in the Ysleta Independent School District will be taxed as if it were an $80,000 house. The other 2 districts are still at $100,000. Then the $15,000 statutory exemption takes place, and now the other 2 school districts have a home that will be taxed at $85,000, but we also get the additional $15,000. So now the 80 becomes 65. So the difference is this, that in the Ysleta Independent School District, the gentleman that lives in that $100,000 house will pay taxes for a $65,000 house. Whereas the individuals that live in the Socorro and in the El Paso Independent School District will pay taxes on an $85,000 house. So the fact that they're at $1.28 or $1.33, even when you tax the $85,000 house at those lower tax rates, they pay more taxes than people in the Ysleta Independent School District do for houses because of the 20% house exemption or homestead exemption. I'll give you one that's even more dramatic. Let's say the house in Ysleta is a $200,000 house, because we're talking about percentages. What's 20% of 200,000? That's 40,000, right? Plus another 15. What will the $200,000 homeowner pay taxes on? A $145,000 house What will the $200,000 homeowner in Socorro and EPISD pay taxes on? A $185,000 house. So it doesn't matter that their rate appears to be lower. The reality is they're being taxed on more house than anyone in the Ysleta Independent School District could ever be taxed on, because of the percent plus 15,000. This right here, by the way, I asked the faculty and staff earlier today how many people knew this. Nobody knew this. There's a $120,000 house. If you're in Socorro, they adjust your house from 120 feet. There is no homestead, 20% homestead exemption. You're at 120,000, you get 15 off of that, you land at 105, you get taxed at 105, even at 123, $1.23, they're paying $1,292. That same homeowner in Ysleta gets the 20% off, that brings it down to 96, then another 15,000 off, that brings it to 81, and even, see that $1.46? That's not our tax rate. That's the tax rate that we would need to secure $400 million. And you still pay $1,183. That is less than what they pay in Socorro, and it's less than what they pay in EPISD, and you got $400 million for your kids. That's exactly what happens. And they get a better education. That right there will be mailed to every living soul in this district who keeps telling me that our tax rate is already too high. It is. On the surface, it's too high. What you're missing is that you get a beautiful benefit in that 20% off the top homestead exemption that this Board of Trustees, well, maybe not the current Board of Trustees, but the Ysleta Board of Trustees agreed to give their homeowners years ago to help them economically. 20%. A $400,000 homeowner would get $80,000 off the top, and then 15 more. The $400,000 homeowner is going to pay taxes on a $300,000 house. That's key. You want to know why our buildings are falling behind? Because too many people believe they're already paying too much for our schools. And the reality is, given what we've done for kids in this district, they're not paying enough. This is key. Any other questions? I know, I got quiet too. I looked at that and I thought, wow. Well, listen, we're not done. We're going to continue and try and receive as much feedback as possible from as many people as possible. I know this is a big deal. I know it's a huge investment, but I'll leave you with this, because this is what I truly believe, and that is that the character of a community can be measured by how they invest in their young and how they care for their old. This is about investing in our young. Thank you so much for coming tonight. I really appreciate it.